County Planning Commission for Thursday, July 14th, 2022, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comments?
Jeff Smith from 10 Island Yacht Club. I just wanted to give you a status report on the text amendment that you voted on. On June 9th. I'm waiting for Amy and Stephanie to meet and work with me on the wording to clearly identify the consecutive days as you requested in your vote.
Okay. Thank you.
Amy did approach me this morning and said we would meet. There apparently was a misunderstanding of what you voted on and what they had in mind.
Okay. Meeting minute review.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Extension request, updates, legislation, and legal matters.
Stephanie Jones, Long Range Planner. As Jeff has alluded to, I want to confirm with the board whether the board wants to see the RV overnight parking in the WVC as a temporary use or not as a temporary use. I know we had a lot of discussions about that back and forth at last month's meeting, and I just want to confirm it with the board whether the board
Well,
sees this.
explain to the board what the difference between the two.
Yep. So the temporary use, it would still be an accessory use, but it would be an accessory temporary use. The temporary use would basically put amount of days on the actual use itself, most likely 180 days, and the applicant would come in for a permit every year for those 180 days for that accessory use. There are other temporary uses in the WVC. So I want to get your confirmation. That wasn't part of the motion. Basically, the motion was just to address those consecutive 4 days. But as moving forward, you guys basically, it was conditioned upon that. So we want to make sure it's clear and that the language moving forward is what the Planning Commission wanted.
And that 180 is out of 365.
Yep, it'd be, yep.
Mr. Reese, can you hear us?
Yes, Madam Chair.
You made that motion. Can you clarify what your intent was? I believe I knew what it was, but.
So it was my intent to allow it to be 365 days, however, not continuous, and the days had to be listed as, or identified as far as their length.
The 4 days.
Yes, up to 4 days.
Limit 4 days each time. Is there any other comments?
I was pretty sure that our focus was temporary. The presentation was made that
That was my memory.
temporary because it was for on weekend type events that they wanted to have someone that brought a camper in or whatever they were going to reside in, and they would use that for during the boat show or during events, races, or whatever it might be. It was totally a temporary type approach. We didn't want to turn it into a trailer park.
Exactly.
Well, but may I ask a question? So I'm a little confused as usual. The 180 days, I mean, that's where you're 180 out of 365, you're allowed to have RVs on the property.
You could have that use.
But what
yes.
we were talking about, I thought, with regards to the 4 days, was that you couldn't have any single RV on the property
Right.
over 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it sounds like we're talking about two
Different
different
types of
things.
temporary, I think
Yes.
is what you're.
So you have individual users, for lack of a better word, that are limited to 4 days. But then the yacht club, it's either going to be, they can allow a maximum of 180 days of use or 365 days, or whatever we pick, I guess. But for the sake of conversation, either half a year or they can come in every day as long as that individual user is not there over 4 days straight. Which means you could have RVs there year round. Just not the same ones.
Yeah, I mean.
180 out
yeah.
of the 365.
Right.
Not
But
every day of the
no,
year.
but what she's asking is, do we
So,
want to have it for
I think we need a little more
365?
clarification here. As an accessory use, and you would just basically state that you could only be there 4 days, that would be the accessory use. That would be for the entire year. You would have one permit, and it would be everlasting, basically. As a temporary use, the applicant would have to come in. You would still say the 4 days, the limit of 4 days, but the applicant would have to come in every year to capture those 180 days that they could use that temporary use. Did I clarify that enough?
They have to specify the 180 days they want to.
They would, yeah, through that process,
So
they
what
would
would
have.
happen if their 180 days was up, but after they had submitted their request, they had another event come up?
I mean, as a board, we were specific with the 180 days because the 180 days is captured in the code in other places, and it just seemed consistent. Also, it's for the fact that if you're looking at the floodplain ordinance, basically, the floodplain ordinance captures 180 days as a temporary use, not necessarily an RV, but it addresses that the floodplain, and this is in the floodplain, as 180 days is what a temporary use would be. So that's where we kind of pulled the 180 from. It wasn't just. So I just want a little bit of direction prior to moving forward to the county commissioners, and that way we have a confirmation, basically.
Did you have something you wanted to say? No, I'm sorry, but introduce yourself again, please.
Jeff Smith, Kent Island Yacht Club. I believe the temporary use was discussed and pushed to the side, and that the actual vote taken was on the text amendment as presented, with the exception of the Kent Narrows Foundation's recommendations, which changed a little bit of the wording, and then also you changed and put a period after the one, so it wasn't organization. And then the clarification needed to be to identify the consistency of consecutive days. And I believe that Mr. Reese, and I think that Mr. Sylvester also talked about the temporary use, and indicated that because we'd have to be reapplying for it every 6 months, that wasn't really practical for what the yacht club does.
Well, you couldn't do it every 6 months.
Right. And then
You only get 6 months a year.
right. But we talked about that, and the yacht club is a year-round thing, and I thought it was clearly discussed throughout the whole piece, and the other clarification that they wanted, but wasn't put in the actual vote text, was they wanted to know the amount of stay, and what I suggested was to have a logbook that could be viewed at any time requested, which we would have anyway.
Right. So Mr. Reese has said that it was his intent that it be 365 days. What's the pleasure of the board? Let's go around.
Again, 365, I mean, I can understand if there's an overlap, as Deb mentioned, that there may be something that gets outside the 180 window, but I still go back to my 4 days consistent,
Right,
consecutive.
but they're
days.
two different issues.
Yeah,
The way I would like to address the 4-day issue was to put in our amendment that we would, said vehicle must vacate the property for a minimum of 3 consecutive days prior to parking again. And then the organization would be required to maintain a logbook of RV stays that may be viewed when questioned. I would like to add that to what we had originally put.
Teddy, what's your thoughts?
I would support what he just read.
Right, that would keep people from just moving on, going to the grocery store, coming back and plugging back in.
Which is exactly what we talked about. And that's, I would think that would be a simple way to address the situation.
I think that there's a reservations that perhaps we could do the first year on a trial basis and see how it works for the 180, but I don't, because I don't want it, and I don't think the public would like to see that turned into an RV park. I don't think it'll be that, but if that's the caution,
Well, I don't think the yacht club would want.
no, agreed, that's not.
Yeah, it's clearly not that's not what the yacht club wants. We don't
You can
want,
always cut it back from what we allow you.
right.
Kathy,
I wasn't present for the discussion on this last, so I'm not.
you're here now.
I would tend to agree with what Teddy said and Tom. I understand the concerns. I did review the materials, but.
Mr. Sylvester?
So are you going to be applying, is he going to be applying for a permit to this every year?
No, if you don't
So
list
once
this.
you do this,
right.
it's done?
If
And
you
there's-
don't list it as a temporary use, then it's one permit, one accessory use permit, and it's done.
All right, so
If
what
it's a
sort of,
temporary use, he has to apply every year.
okay, say that again?
If it's a temporary use, not the temporary use as in the 4 days, a temporary use as in a temporary use permit, you would have to apply every year.
Every year?
Is it every year or every 180 days, as you wrote here?
We would have it it's a revolving year, but I could have to look in the code to confirm that, but.
Well,
You only get 180
historically,
days out of the 365.
What concerns me, and I actually support you, but what concerns me is that you have a bunch of itinerants coming in, and present management accepted, of course. Management changes, and then, we have a party zone. It's not been my experience that RV owners are rowdy and drunks and whatever, abuse their privileges. But if that does happen, that the citizens should have a right to address that. And we should have, somebody in this county should have a right to address that. Is there a way to do that?
I don't know that there would be, unless you say that it has to be a permit every year, I don't know that they would have to go through. If it's something for noise, that would end up being basically law enforcement, not planning and zoning.
I would like to interject that the yacht club has constitution and bylaws, and also the application for membership that requires people to be a respectable behavior, and the yacht club doesn't want anything like you just discussed either. And that has been throughout the regime, and yes, we do change every year to different officers, but the Constitution hasn't changed, and neither has the membership approval, and I think our record shows pretty well that we've adhered to those standards.
You have anything else, Mr. Sylvester?
No, ma'am.
Jeffrey?
yes, Madam Chair, my concern is with the 180 days, that the way that rule's been applied in the county for temporary uses, it allows a maximum of 180 days per calendar year. Which means if they applied January 1st, they would get through June 1st for that 6-month period. I don't think that was our, did I lose it? I don't think that was our intent. I thought it was to allow it year-round, but in hearing some of the other board members, maybe there was some misunderstanding as far as the number of days. Maybe Mr. Drummond can verify, if it's 180 days, is that per one person, or is that by any one person throughout the entire calendar year?
I think Mr. Drummond changed his mask today.
I'm not wearing socks today, that's what it is. I mean, my primary concern is we're focusing entirely on the yacht club, but this really isn't about the yacht club, so just be careful. Notwithstanding what the yacht club does, this is a text amendment, it's not apply to everyone. So just be cautious when you make that decision. I think that's probably what staff's concern is as well.
By making it temporary use or by,
Well, whatever the decision is, it's going to be for everybody. That's my primary point. It's not just we keep focusing on what the yacht club may want or need. but
and
it's-
it's also my, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that even though you can only have 180 days throughout the year, you could have April and May and then do August, September, October, November.
I
If
think
you
they
wanted.
could,
You don't have to have 180 consecutive days.
I think they can draft it to suit you. So I think all you need to do is tell Stephanie what you want, albeit it might be different than the other 180-day requirements in the ordinance. I mean, that's fair game.
Well,
I mean, you need-
to answer or direct your question, this text amendment is directed at a fraternal organization owning property. So it does limit it quite a bit. It's not just for everybody.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just saying, it's global though.
Understood.
So you gotta look at not in the context of the yacht club. It could go basically anywhere.
It's
Depending on what the
global,
provision says, it could go anywhere. You know.
and it sets the precedent for the next person.
Jeff, wait a minute, one at a time, okay, Kathy?
I just wanted to, I mean, if I may, could I ask Stephanie or staff, given her knowledge and an overview, what would best case scenario be? Can I ask her that? Sure. Okay. What would your best case scenario recommendation be, given you know all the facets
Yep.
of this?
From our discussion, or the discussion last month, I took it away as that the planning commission wanted it to be a temporary use, as it being a temporary use permit, where they would come in every year and apply for that permit. I don't know how often the yacht club would use that use particularly. I mean, is 6 months enough that, do you have people coming and staying in the wintertime when?
We do.
Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, you can ask as many as you want.
To the young lady. Stephanie, okay.
Thank you.
Did I hear you at the beginning of this saying you didn't really care if it was 180 or 365 as far as the temporary permit goes? You just like the 180 because
Yeah.
the,
You're correct, yeah, we pulled the 180 days
but
because.
if we said a temporary permit with 365 days, you get the freedom, right?
Oh,
Well, our code says that temporary uses are 180 days.
Who's talking? I'm
That's
hearing
me.
voices.
That's me. So it would be no different than a restaurant wanting to put up a tent, a temporary tent to do outdoor seating, let's say. They get a temporary use for 180 days. They can dictate those days, so they can say March 1st through, September-ish, and then the tent has to come down. So this would be the same thing. The applicant would apply for his permit. If he says March 1st through September, they could have campers there then. The rest of the 6 months, basically over winter, they wouldn't allow any. The 180 days is codified.
I would like to
But it's not
remind,
consecutive, correct?
You could, I think, dictate, and Jeff, you'd have to tell me, it wouldn't be a temporary use. You would just allow the applicant to move forward to the text amendment and specify in the new text for a period of no more than 270 days. It would be an allowable use at that point, an accessory, but
well, I would like to just interject that we had already been doing this since 1952, and then when this all came about and there was a complaint issued, they told me that they looked the other way for all those years, and now we'd have to go about it differently. So I don't know how that plays into it, but we went from 1952 to now to 180 days and talking 270 and 365. It gets pretty interesting what the yacht club's been doing for a long time and been doing it.
But when they went back and checked the satellite pictures, there
think it-
was no,
Yeah, but the satellite
RVs
picture,
there.
well, but if you stay for 4 days only, when's the satellite picture taken? I mean, we never had people stay for a length of time, and those satellite pictures aren't current. So,
no, our biggest concern is, does this open up a can of worms for everybody? Does it muddy the waters for everybody else?
Well, I understand that concern, and hopefully we can address it in an easy way.
And how burdensome would a reapplication every year be?
Well, it wouldn't be that burdensome, but when we reapply, are we going to have to wait for 4 months to get a signature on the application saying that we got it? Or, I mean, that's been my experience with some of this recently. So how can we count on it for
Do we
our
have anybody
members?
here that knows about permits?
I just asked how burdensome it would be for them to reapply every year, and he said it's not, except that it bottlenecks here, and it took 4 months the last time to get a signature.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean 4 months for this.
Oh, okay.
It was other applications that
Okay.
are applied for, and
You mean something going through planning and zoning?
yes.
Because I know your pain.
In general.
I mean,
Okay.
that's, usually then there's a text amendment at the end, the applicant still has to go through and get a permit, that's a normal process. On that end, I think you would just have to apply further in advance, there's no,
No, but I think what he's asking is, does a permit take a week, or does it take 4 months?
Well, I think if the applicant applied January 1st and specified he
The
wants
date
his
he wants
use
to
to start on
start.
March 1st, he'd have
Right.
plenty of time regardless of how busy we
yeah,
were.
you could specify the date where you want your days to start, not when you submit, obviously, whenever you submit the application, that's not saying
Okay.
when those dates start. And it looks like in the code, there is other temporary uses that say, that are greater than 180 days. A real estate sales office is 1 year. There's other uses that fall, obviously the 6 months, 180 days, that's pretty common.
Special events, I think, has an annual permit as well.
Maximum, contractor's office is for 1 year. Retail kiosk, which is just specific to the WVC, which is kind of obviously what we have here. The maximum length of a permit shall be for no more than 6 months for a given year. So it's kind of all over
It's kind
the,
of like 180 days.
yeah, it's closest to 180 days.
I think the difference there is like the real estate office and the contractor's office, they go away eventually.
Right.
This isn't going to go away. And if
I'm
that's
not
what we
going
want,
away.
that's fine. You know, that's fine, but that's what brings this into question.
Again, not focusing on the yacht club, but wouldn't it help with enforcement, though? I mean, when you got to reissue that
Jeff, can
permit
you
every year.
talk louder?
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, wouldn't it help with enforcement? I mean, when you think about it, if they apply every year, if there is an issue, then you can deal with that issue. And again, it's not about the yacht club, it's about who else might, be seeking the same type of permit. I don't know that wouldn't help address the problem. If there's a problem, they'll have to look at it every year. It won't just go and, go awry, if you will.
If we put the 270 days in, as he suggested, that'll give us the chance to look at it every year.
Yeah.
And if they did that, and you have it in there that it's a fraternal organization, that kind of like limits everything,
Right.
correct?
I mean, obviously, someone in another district could come and obviously submit a text amendment with the same wording if they are a fraternal organization, and it's kind of setting a precedence, and, then, you're going to be looking at is, oh, we've already.
Yeah, but you only have so many fraternal
Right,
organizations.
and we might have already approved this once in this district, so is it consistent with this other district? So that's kind of the can of worms that gets opened also.
Yeah, but that's a real tiny can, right?
I mean, I think there's more.
Comparison.
There's more fraternal organizations. I don't know a number per se, but I mean, you're looking at your Elks, your Lions Club, any of the Moose, any of those would be considered a fraternal organization. So that probably gives you an idea maybe of how many there are in other locations.
Would that solve your problem now? If
It's
we did
270 days, a long enough span of time that,
Well, I'm not smart enough to know where it would fall if we'd said today, 270 days, if it falls into the middle of our season, where we'd have to make another decision. I would prefer.
Middle of your season, you pick the days, we don't pick them.
270 days is 9 months.
You had mentioned 365, and some things are 365. I would much prefer it to be that because we have members come all the time.
If we were to agree to give them 365 days.
Which you can do, right?
Others do say
Yeah,
365,
no,
but like,
I'm saying permanent, just let them do it. Give them the
A
freedom.
straight up,
Give them
not be
freedom
a-
to do what they want to do with their property. And it turns out to be a nightmare, all right? Because I think we're just trying to imagine so many scenarios. It's just chaos trying to get through all that. But give them what they want. If it turns out it does become chaos, at least then at that point, we can see where the problems are happening and address those things, or change the rule. I think we're allowed to change rules.
yeah,
Joe
but
Biden
there's,
thinks the Second Amendment is not absolute, so,
they would still be grandfathered
yeah. Okay,
with what they were approved with.
all right, well,
But if we made it temporary, then they have to review it every year, and we could pull it, so we
You can
keep
do
it temporary.
365
Bill, when you
on
asked
the
that,
you know, I think I understand his problem is that, you know, he's trying to keep, he has a maximum of 180 to 270 days that he can do that. Now he's responsible for keeping track of essentially keeping track of an RV park on his property, and, you know.
that's what he's
you know,
raising his hand for.
What happens when, you know, I assume you guys do lots of fundraisers, not just boat races and things like that. And, there's things that you could do that you can now not do.
We could do the 365 on a temporary basis.
Yeah, do the 365, temporary
There's other
basis, 4-day
365.
limitation.
You said 180 was codified.
I thought it was. There are some that specify different. Stephanie just showed me. It's written, so.
I'm not trying, you know.
No, I absolutely thought it was. So the real estate office, the contractor's office, which are truly temporary because they disappear when they're built out, they do allow them a maximum of 1 year. And I believe that they could reapply, let's say, like 4 seasons or something. Obviously, that's going to be there more than a year. So if they had a temporary construction office, it could be there a year. Obviously, they're not done. They could then reapply. And I think that gives the department the opportunity to address one of your previous concerns. What happens if they're a bad neighbor? Then we can address that at that point in time.
If I remember correctly, I think special events are permanent and they get an annual permit. Isn't it 365 under the special event section?
Special
It's
events
365
do
and you
come
get
in
an
for
annual permit.
temporary.
So if you're, you know, you can get both.
Let's go for the 365 temporary.
And it doesn't look like the temporary use definition, it just says a fixed period of time. It doesn't say a number of days, so you should be
Okay.
good with that definition.
Can I ask you this? With temporary use, or if you word it that way, one of our concerns was in the past, when we've been doing the camping, they gathered around one post and strung out cords across the ground. And as you know, Kent Island is not very well drained, so they would have connections on the ground, and then when it rained, I felt it was dangerous, and we wanted to put up the 6x6 post with the electric on it. I'm not opposed if we could put up those posts and get it off of the ground for the 15 as we specified. And if you at some point said we're bad neighbors and not doing this properly, we'd tear it all out. I don't care, because I know that we would handle
But
this properly.
isn't that under permits for electricians?
Yeah,
or whatever?
we wouldn't
It's not
specify
in our
that in the
bailiwick.
text amendment, that specificity. I think that would be dealt with, you know, electric code, building code, and all of those things when the permit is under review. It's just too specific at this point in time.
Okay?
That
We're talking about the 365 temporary. Let's get
On-
that over with and get on with life.
Okay.
All right, so I think I have direction for that one. I think we can
Is everyone on the board?
Okay.
365, but they have to come back
As a temporary.
5 temporary, 4 days.
365 temporary?
Yes.
Yes.
365 temporary, Mr. Reese?
Agreed.
Okay, all right.
So we'll be able to get that in the wording so we can get it in front of the commissioners
Yep.
as soon as their next meeting?
They have a deadline as to when their meetings are submitted, but I'll get that to you today or tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, I appreciate that. I do have some other updates on text amendments, I'll get that to you. There were 2 amendments that were introduced by the commissioners, 2203 and 2207. 2203 is to repeal the woodlands provisions, and then 2207 is to allow the bonus density of a mixed use in the WVC, the Jamal application. 2205, which was the major extraction in open space, that was pulled by the applicant. That was your unfavorable recommendation, so that one was pulled prior to introduction to the county
Did the
commissioners.
commissioners go for the other 2? No?
So was that, sorry?
The woodlands and the,
Yes, that was introduced, and the commissioner's public hearing will be August 9th. So those are rolling, and 2206, the one that was to be on the agenda today, the applicant received the staff report and wants to work with staff and the recommendation that we had provided. We provided some language to the Planning Commission for them to review, only because the language that was submitted by the applicant was very ambiguous, I would say, the terms that they used, and for us to use that in the code would not be very great, I would say. Okay. So that one, hopefully, I've asked them to get that to us in the next week or 2 so we can get it on the agenda for August, so you should see that then. I think that is all the updates for the text amendments. Amy did have a couple things she wanted to share with you. There is a Governor's Smart Growth Subcabinet. They're holding a public forum. It's a virtual meeting. It's on Wednesday, July 20th. If anyone wants details for that, I can send it out, or I can just send it and then you have it, no matter what. You want me to send it?
why don't you do that?
Okay. They're going to be discussing smart growth, development, neighborhood conservation, and resource management. So kind of a higher level conversation, but it's at the state level, so it's always good to hear. Also, staff is working with DPW, the Commissioner's Office, and the Finance Office to review an impact fee study. Impact fees have been historically high, so the commissioners want to look and see, do the study and see if they can probably be reduced at some point. So, but that is rolling. So I think that is all I have. You guys have any questions?
Anyone have any questions for Stephanie?
No, thank you, and I appreciate your confirmation on the text amendment. So thank you.
Okay, projects, concept plan SP 2110-0082. It is, I just got it. Steve.
Yep. You guys.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Steve Johnson, County Planner for Queen Anne's County Planning and Zoning. Before I start, just wanted to inform everyone that this proposal requires growth allocation. When I finish my discussion, Stephanie's going to take over and discuss a little bit about that process. That being said, we're here to discuss project number SP 2110-0082. The applicant is proposing to construct a 156,000 square foot, 4-story indoor self-storage facility, and they are requesting concept plan approval. This slide gives you a little general location of where the site is located. It's located in Chester, north of Route 50. More specifically, the site is comprised of 3 parcels totaling 10.490 acres located off of Piney Creek Road in Nash Court. These are parcels 287, 351, and 352. As a part of the development proposal, the applicant will propose an administrative subdivision to combine the 3 parcels and eliminate Nash Court. This will create resulting parcels 287 and 351. Resulting parcel 287 is the triangular piece, the upper right of your screen, that's separated by a right-of-way for future Shamrock Road, and it is not a part of this proposed development. All the development on the property will be within the town center zoning district. The property is also located within the Chester-Stevensville growth area. The property is completely inside the critical area. 4.779 acres are in the limited development area, or LDA, shown here in yellow. And 5.711 acres are in the Resource Conservation Area, RCA, shown in green here on your screen. To support the development, the applicant will request growth allocation to redesignate 2.811 acres of LDA to IDA, shown here in red, outlined in black. All the proposed development will be within this area. There are woodlands, wooded non-tidal wetlands, and their associated buffers and floodplain on the site. 1.4 acres of woodlands are proposed to be cleared. Shown here is the stippled area on your screen. I don't know if that shows up well on your screens or not. While forest conservation is not required due to the property being located within a critical area, the applicant is proposing to deed restrict 5.987 acres of woodlands in the RCA and LDA, and that area will be shown on my next slide. You'll be able to see that. 0.23 acres of non-tidal wetlands buffer to be disturbed. That's that kind of strip running at the south side of the site, stippled and hatched. 0.17 acres of floodplain to be filled. That's the hatched area kind of at the center of the screen. And it's important to note that the critical area buffers were expanded for the non-tidal wetlands as well. There's a glimpse of the concept plan. In fuchsia, you can see the proposed 156,000 square foot indoor self-storage facility in accordance with 18.1D3A2. Light industrial uses such as this are permitted to exceed 65,000 square feet of gross floor area. Conceptually, all town center non-residential development standards are met with this proposal. The property will be served by public water and sewer. Stormwater has been provided on site and will continue to be reviewed by DPW. Those features are seen kind of to the west of the building and east and south, kind of at the bottom of the cul-de-sac there. All required parking has been provided, and that deed restricted area I just spoke about is shown on the right in green. It's also important to note that the applicant has proposed a 6-foot high fence. It's a dashed black line kind of between the fuchsia building and the Hudson property there at the middle of the screen. Here's some pictures of the existing conditions on site. This is a shot looking down Piney Creek Road, where the county vehicle is parked. That's Nash Court. The driveway in the foreground there is the Drummond property. This is looking down Nash Court to the southeast. The entrance to the Hudson property is there on the right, and the structures at the center of the picture will be removed as part of the proposal. There's another shot. I included this picture to show the proximity of the site to the Hudson property, trying to give you some perspective of how close this will be. Again, that structure there at the right side of the picture will be removed as part of the development. This is looking east. You can't really make it out, but there's another structure kind of to the center of the picture there, to the right of that yellow house you see in the foreground. Both of those will be removed. Here's a better view of that structure looking northeast. This is looking south towards Route 50 at the end of Nash Court. This is looking into the site from Route 50 headed westbound. This is a Google image. And this is also a Google image looking northeast into the site. Here are the architectural renderings of the property, the proposed structure. Number one is the west-facing side of the building. This is what you would see from the parking lot. Number two is the rear of the structure. This is a blow-up so you can see it a little bit better. And number three is the south side of the structure that would be facing Route 50. And number four is what would be facing the Hudson property and Piney Creek Road. And here's a blow-up of that slide as well. Here's an overall view of the structure. Those, I believe that color has been kind of muted, more maroon since our last discussion, just for your information. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie, and she'll discuss the growth allocation process. Did you want to say or something?
Yes. All right. So since this is a growth allocation application, I wanted to kind of go over the process with you, just because it is something you don't see very often, and maybe some of you have never seen one at all. So the first step is for the applicant to submit a concept plan, and that's what they've done with this application you see before you. So at this point, the Planning Commission can provide technical comments on the application. You could provide comments such as, you want to see different landscaping or some things like that, or just the conditions you put on the actual concept plan. But then the next step would be that the applicant will take your technical comments and incorporate them into the concept plan and submit their growth allocation petition to the county commissioners. Once they submit that to the county commissioners, that petition will be then basically conveyed to the Planning Commission for review. So once we receive that, you would hold a public hearing, and then you would receive all the details of the growth allocation petition itself. And those would include consistency with the comp plan, how they meet the adjacency requirements, how it basically meets habitat and protection area requirements. So that's when you would really go over the growth allocation requirements itself. There's a whole portion of the code that's devoted just to growth allocation, and a whole portion of the COMAR that's devoted to growth allocation. So I didn't want to go into all those details today, but I just really wanted to give you the insights. But once you have your public hearing, you would send a recommendation to the county commissioners. Once they have that recommendation, they would hold a public hearing, and then they will make a decision at that point, but it'll be conditioned upon the critical areas decision. So then that decision will go to the critical area commission. They will hold a public hearing as well, and then they would render a decision. That decision would come back to the county commissioners. At that point, the commissioners would make the ultimate decision. The planning commission, county commissioners, and the critical area commission can put conditions on this application, so that if you see something relevant that should be changed with this application, obviously you can make that a condition, and it would have to be included within the application when it comes in for final site plan. All conditions have to be met at that point in time. So that's the overall process itself that's outlined there on the right-hand side. As you can see, they're at the first step right now. So this is a long process. It's not just obviously like a site plan review. It is kind of drawn out. Basically, they're required to do this because of the use that they're proposing and the density that they're proposing it at. Their lot coverage would be over the required that they could have in the LDA. So that's why it has to be IDA where there is no lot coverage requirement. And Steve has kind of already gone over the acreages and everything, but, and I kind of addressed that has to be consistent with the comp plan, the critical area law, and also other conditions, but growth allocation is a discretionary process. There is a finite acreage that the county has that they receive. Basically, I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's 5% of the RCA acreage that the county has. At this point in time, we have about 460 acres of growth allocation remaining. So, like I said, it's discretionary based on the application. But do you guys have any questions regarding just growth allocation and process and how that will move forward? No? Okay.
Can I, how many acres are they asking for in this?
They're asking for 2.8.
2.8 out of 460. Okay.
So I think we're done, right?
Slip it back, Stephanie, to the-
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Joseph Stevens, on behalf of the applicant, Cloud Ventures, which is the contract purchaser in Nashville Properties LLC, and I got representatives of both here that can answer questions for you that you might have. Just a little bit of a way of background, and then I'll turn.
Wait a minute, you're representing who?
I represent both Nash Properties LLC and the contract purchaser, Cloud Ventures. So I'm representing them both. They both have the same interest here before you today. Before Kevin gives you a little more detail on the plan and goes through some of the background, you may recall that Nashville Properties filed an amendment with your text amendment last year to be able to do indoor storage completely accessed indoors, so it's not like mini warehouses. And that was approved by you all. I think they put on a lot of evidence and information about the need for that type of use and the real demand that there is right now, especially with some of the larger communities building out in the area. People need an area, someplace to store things, and so that's kind of what the impetus of this was. We've submitted these plans back in October, and they've gone through quite a few renditions. And most of the focus has been, and with the assistance of the planning staff, has been to condense and reduce the scope and the size of any disturbance on the site. You can see that from the plans. Another focus was to provide for deed restrictions and protections for the land that's not going to be developed, so it doesn't come back in before you at some future time to get developed. And another focus was to find some public amenities for the county if they grant this application. I think Kevin can talk about what everyone's come to and I think is comfortable with right now in terms of some public amenities. So growth allocation is a long, extensive process. We'll probably still be in this in a year, just finishing up if things go well. We'll be back to you again for a public hearing on really the critical area aspects of it. Today is for concept plan approval, hopefully, and any conditions you might include or recommendations of changes you might want to see. And then we'll file our application to the commissioners. They'll send it to you. We'll have a public hearing and go through all of that, plus all the critical area standards. And then if you recommend favorably, or whatever your recommendation is, it goes to the county commissioners. They hold a public hearing, send it to critical areas. They may or may not have a public hearing. They got the option. Then back to the county commissioners for another public hearing. And then it comes to you for site plan approval. That's the process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
He got the job all done, didn't he?
What's that?
He got the job all done already.
That's right, exactly. Good morning, Kevin Sharon with DMS and Associates. I thought what I would start with is just kind of doing a page turn of the concept plan to kind of walk you through what's involved in the concept plan. Again, this is step one. So the title sheet breaks down all the various aspects of the property. It started at about 10.5 acres, 10.49. And then by the time we get through everything and the parcel 287 is removed and we get down to the actual limits of disturbance, we're at 2.8 acres of the 10.5. So the second sheet is the environmental features. There's also a colored environmental features plan in your packet. It shows the property does have, obviously it has non-tidal wetlands, it has forest, it has floodplain. The focus of this development is where the two existing houses are. So we try to focus the redevelopment where there was already development before. So the third page is then just an administrative subdivision that would take the three parcels, 351, 352, and 287, and on the west side of Shamrock Road, which is a state highway right away for a possible future overpass of 5301. On the west side of that is the resulting parcel 351, and the east side of that is the resulting parcel 287, which has a little frontage on Piney Creek itself. And that parcel will be, as part of this growth allocation request, be donated to the county for use as a trail spur or whatever the county sees fit. The next page, highlighted in shaded area, is the 2.8 acres of growth allocation request. East of the shaded area is RCA, and then the remaining on the west of the line going up and down the page is LDA, and then the shaded area will be the request for IDA. The next page is the actual site plan. Access will come in off of Piney Creek Road, where the current Nash Court is right now. It will come down with about 28 parking spaces for the indoor storage. There will be 4 designated areas right at the middle of the building for people to load and unload. And then there's also a cul-de-sac at the end for not only people with trailers and larger vehicles, but also for emergency access to get down there and turn around. We are showing on this conceptual stormwater management. For the parking lot, we have 2 bioretention areas, and then on the back side of the building will be a submerged gravel wetland. And I'll just briefly touch on that. The stormwater management, we've done a conceptual stormwater report. The target volume that we have to treat is about 9,500 cubic feet, and the 3 areas that we're showing right now would provide almost 15,000 cubic feet. So we're significantly over what we need to provide at a conceptual level, so we feel comfortable moving forward that we will be able to address stormwater management comfortably. Because it's also, upon award of growth allocation, it'll be IDA, we'll have to meet the 10% pollutant removal. And so the load for that, the requirement to remove is 2.3 pounds per year, and with these BMPs in place, we would remove 2.5 pounds per year. So we're slightly above what the requirement is there, but certainly meet it. The final page, or the next page, is just a conceptual sewer and water utility plan. We'll be extending a water main from the entrance of Gibson's Grant down to serve this property and other properties along the route, and then providing new sewer connection for the building and also for the neighboring Hudson property. The final plan is just a conceptual landscape plan, which shows trees for the parking lot, the remaining wooded areas, and then also the 6-foot privacy fence adjacent to the Hudson property. And that, I'll point out, and I believe Mr. Hudson might be here, but I'll point out that that was at the request. We originally had a row of evergreen trees there, but I believe the request was made through the property owner that it be a fence. So we swapped that out to a fence. Just a couple other points. It was mentioned earlier, but the amount of growth allocation that the county has is currently 461 acres, and we're requesting 2.8 acres. So that's important to keep in mind in terms of the scale. We do have, so the iterations of what Joe was even talking about of how this project has condensed started even before we made our initial submittal to the county. We realized that there were going to be some uphill battles in some of the plans that we originally had, so internally we shrunk it down. We feel that we have a very efficient and compact project in 156,000 square feet. It's a low impact use. It doesn't require a whole lot of parking. It's stacked 4 stories high, and we get it in 2.8 acres, which includes stormwater areas and everything else that's needed for landscaping. The building itself will be about 330 feet from Route 5301, and the majority of that will be wooded. There will be some areas where the stormwater is, but most of it will be wooded.
You mean the screening around it is already wooded?
Is already wooded, yeah, between 50 and the building. And then, again, the overall property is about 10.5 acres, and our proposed LOD is 2.8 acres. So that's basically a quarter of the land that we're using, or about 26.8% of the land. So anyways, that's kind of an overview of the project, and be happy to answer any questions.
There's no outdoor storage, right?
No outdoor storage.
No outdoor storage, okay, just parking is required.
Correct.
Okay. So we have the person, the contract purchaser, who will actually build the facility and own it and run it, and owns other facilities in the area, and that's Jason Clow and Jody Schultz, who is the principal with Nashville Properties. Can answer any questions you have. And I think Stephanie made this point. I know she did in the staff report. It was done well. And that we will go through each of the critical area standards at the next level in terms of allocation, to see if you make a positive recommendation for us to receive growth allocation to the county commissioners. And so we're not, we didn't plan to do that, nor do we think that now is the time to do it, because the ordinance is clear on what this first step is.
Okay, do we have questions?
Are you gonna have to upgrade, the road frontage going in?
So yes, the request by DPW is to widen the south edge of Piney Creek Road, similar to what Wye River Marine did. So we'll widen it out, curb it, and provide drainage up to the entrance to the project. Yeah.
Do you have any questions, Tom? Anybody? Okay, can I get a motion?
How about public comment? Public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, public comment, right.
While he's checking out, we do have a letter that was sent in.
Okay.
This letter comes from Annie Richards from the Shore Rivers Keeper. To the Planning Commission of Queens County, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the proposed concept plans for the armored storage facility on Piney Creek Road in Nash Court in Kent Island, submitted by the Cloud Ventures LLC. Shore Rivers is a nonprofit organization with over 2,000 members. We are dedicated to the protection and restoration of the waterways of the Eastern Shore through science-based advocacy, education, and restoration. After reviewing related documents, I urge the Commission to adopt an unfavorable report regarding the concept plan based on the following points. Impervious surface. The roof line of a 156,000 square foot building alone will have considerable impacts to surrounding sensitive areas. Additionally, the applicant is seeking floodplain fill authorization, which will compromise the integrity of the surrounding marshlands and interrupt the natural and free services they provide to filter and treat stormwater runoff. Projects like this could work against the county as they strive to meet MS4 permit requirements for impervious surfaces on Kent Island in the future. Woodland and wetland habitat. This 10.49 acre parcel is located within the critical area and contains marshland, woodland habitat, and other sensitive areas that the Queens County seeks to protect per its Comprehensive Plan Vision Statement, Chapter 5, Environmental Resources, Appendix D, Water Sources element. Impairment of this critical and dwindling habitat on Kent Island will cause the further pollutants to enter the Chester River and decrease the resiliency of the current infrastructure in the vicinity of the lot to the impacts of climate change. According to STAC documents provided by the Department of Public Works, this plan fails to avoid sensitive areas and requires special authorizations to encroach on them. The proposed development includes encroachments that eliminate woodland habitat, eliminate wetlands, and reduce the natural floodplain. That was on STAC report pages 4 and 5. Transition marshland is critical for the protection of water quality in local water bodies, as well as local communities and neighborhoods. Wastewater allocation. The most recent update of the QAC comprehensive plan discusses in great detail the challenges of limited remaining sewer and water allocations under the current TMDL restrictions. This proposal, which in its current form does not benefit the environmentally sensitive resources on the parcel in question, may not be a worthy example of additional sewer allocations. On behalf of the Shore Rivers, I strongly urge you to reconsider this plan as currently proposed. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you for your consideration. Annie Richards, Chester Riverkeeper.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I just have one, Mr. Hudson, sorry about this.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Andrea Kinder. I'm with Advantage Self-Storage. We're currently an operator on Kent Island. I guess we just wanted to give a little perspective. This facility size that they're proposing is bigger than all the facilities currently on Kent Island and Graysonville combined. We've got properties all over the East Coast, and usually this size facility is reserved for big, large cities. And so we feel that there's no need for this size facility in Queen Anne's County. It's not healthy for the Kent Island and for the industry in the area.
Can you let me know your name? Spell your last name, please.
Any other public comment? Mr.
Hudson.
I just passed you.
Miss, oh. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was hers. I missed that.
Yeah, I just pulled it from out there.
I signed up, and
You're
I'm,
right, you're
and I'm
right.
ready.
Yes, sir.
I don't know whether I'm ready or
You
not.
have our full attention.
I apologize to the panel, but I do have a serious hearing problem, which is was job related. I'm a retired police officer with 30 years of service. And I am
Service.
currently and have been involved with the ownership of 2300 Piney
Wait,
Creek
can
Road.
you, first of all, can you introduce yourself and where are you from? Introduce yourself and where you are
I
from.
apologize. My name is James Hudson. My wife, Mary Ellen Hudson. We're both senior citizens, have lived and paid taxes in Queen Anne's County since 1976.
Where do you live in Queen Anne's County?
We currently own 2 homes, one in Castle Marina and one at 2300 Piney Creek Road.
Okay.
2300 Piney Creek Road, I have owned on and off as things evolved since 1985. This has been used as a family home since 1985. We raised 3 grandchildren there, and we currently have a 5-month-old great-grandson living in this residence. And we've done so without interruption because of the community and all. Pardon me if I get a little bit, I'm 83 years old, I get a little off track sometimes. We understand progress, and we desire, and the desire to earn money. And we have serious issue with what we have seen so far as the project having all the benefits and us having none. And what I'm referring to there is that we're going to have a 4-story high building erected within 20 feet of my property line. There's a lot of integral parts with that. Most of them are water related, and traffic is another. We're basically looking for resolution to 3 major items. One is privacy through a more dense buffer zone. I don't think the buffer zone is nowhere near adequate. We would like to have security based, our line of thinking on security as a privacy fence that would separate my children and my pets' play area from this building. And we noticed on the site plan that there's a side door, exit door. The zoning for this area currently would require a pavement where that exit door is located, which would extend runoff water and everything else towards our lot, which is always wet when it rains. The other thing is, it would probably, when we first got this information, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a lawyer. I'm just speaking from my personal situation. When we first got it, our idea was it would be the same as the one over behind the 7-Eleven, and we felt that was something we could probably live with. Having looked into it in greater consideration, we see a lot of problems created for our family. That's been a family there since 1985. That's 36 years. We've lived there with harmony with the with the area. We know what the area is, and we had, pardon me, I'm trying to get that,
It's okay,
that
take your
3
time,
minutes
you're
done.
right.
I wrote this up and I'll give it to each one of the board members and they can do what they see fit with it. But, we're kind of disappointed that we feel we've been encroached upon in this, over this long period of time, first by the Cross Island Trail, which we have a lot of things I could go into that occurred to this property since that went in. And now this project to the rear of us. It's going to change what we've been accustomed to for a lot of years dramatically. We're willing to live with what's happening and progress because we know progress happens. But we're really concerned about the security of our children and our pets. And I'm not financially in a position to relocate. I will pass this out. I thank you for the opportunity. And our intentions are to coexist with whatever happens.
Yeah, I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you. I'll pass it on for you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank
If you
you.
have any questions, you have to holler at me. I didn't hear very well.
No, we're good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We don't have anything further, but if you have questions for us or the ownership, we'd be happy to go ahead and answer those questions. I mean, I think that we can go into some detail in regards to some of the comments if you have questions on them. In particular, things such as floodplain or any of the requirements, we've complied with all of the requirements of the codes. So there's nothing that we're asking for no variances or anything of that nature from any of the codes. So that is in line with the ordinances in place. But if you have specific questions about, from Mr. Schultz and Mr. Clow, about the design, the screening, the landscaping, the buffering, the security, I think they're the ones to answer those questions.
So I have a question.
Actually, before we go, Madam Chair, there's still people, Ms. Viana is a neighboring property owner. I don't know if she's interested in making public comment. I also see Mrs. Richards on there who had her testimony read.
We had not received anything from Ms. Viana with comment.
Okay.
If she wanted to make it.
She might just be watching.
That's fine. I just wanted making sure before we left the public comment period. We were checking online, but there's no indication. Thank you, Bruce.
So after hearing Mr. Hudson's comments about his privacy concerns and security concerns, have you taken steps to take these issues that he raises into account? I know I heard something about a fence being built as opposed to tree lines.
Well, we had, of course, I called Mr. Hudson several months ago and told him what we were planning, and, we certainly want to be good neighbors, and I'm sure there were going to be some concerns they had, and we'd do whatever we had to do to address them. And we had some trees planted there, and I think we took the trees out and put the fence in because we had heard that they wanted a fence. But, I mean, we'd be glad to put the trees or the fence. I don't think there's enough room to put you don't want a little pissy tree there. You want something that's going to...
You gotta talk into the mic so
Well,
they can hear you.
And at the end of the day, we want to be good neighbors, so I think there wasn't quite enough room to put a fence and a tree, and a tree of any substance that was going to grow and give them some blockage. So I think if you'd be willing to allow us to put some trees on your property and a fence and work with us in that respect, we'd be more than happy to do that. But we didn't want to put a tree right next to the building and have it grow into the
I
building.
still don't think he can hear you.
Well, let's just say we'll meet with Mr. Hudson and the family and work this out.
I think that's probably the best thing to do, because
That's
I
the
think
best-
there's a
that's the
willingness
best
to try and
thing.
Yeah.
provide security and address those issues, and we can come back, and we will be back here in
Yeah.
a couple of months, and we can tell you how we've addressed that, and if Mr. Hudson's not satisfied, he can address you again, and you all can make a decision at that point in time, if that's okay with you all.
So you can make technical comments, which is what you can do at this step for growth allocation. Would you want that to be one of your technical comments that they work with?
If they work with the
Yeah.
neighbor?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you got that? Okay.
I have a question.
We'll have to look into this. I'll just try to write down his concerns. The side door exit, I'm not sure we'll look into that. I'm sure that's resolvable, whatever it is. What's that?
It's a fire exit. There won't be any.
So it would just be a 5x5 pad,
Yeah.
so, but we can make sure that the drainage is addressed.
One comment that he has in his remarks here kind of catches my attention. Reference being made to 4-story high building being erected within 20 feet of our property line.
Correct.
Are you that close?
Well, the setback's only 10 feet, and we pushed it back, we doubled that just to provide a little bit more elbow room there for the fence and the
It
tree.
seems pretty tight for the size building. you have.
There's some competing interests going on there. Where on the other side of the building, you can see is the non-tidal wetlands.
Okay.
And there was a lot of interest in us moving out of those and making sure there was no impact there. So as they were looking at that, there's that shift, that compromise, so to speak. No impact to non-tidal wetlands. There's small impact temporary for construction, but there's no permanent impact on the non-tidal wetlands on the site, and that's where the location kind of gets shifted. It's well outside of the setback.
If you were to move that line back 20 feet by reducing the total square footage, how much would that affect you? I mean, 10 feet or 20 feet or just...
Move it back 20 feet from the,
Whatever, I mean, pick a number, but, how many square, for every foot that you set that building back, how many square foot of building space do you lose? And, can you afford to compromise a little bit there?
well, that would be a.
Yeah, it's 4 stories tall, so if you move it 20 feet, it's 100 feet wide. You lose, whatever square footage that is times 4. Which is a lot.
8,000
That's my
square
question.
feet.
What is the
That's
square
8,000
footage?
square feet.
Yeah,
Okay. Per foot?
per foot, yeah.
Yeah,
Per
I think,
foot.
it's 10-foot setbacks by code, we're 20. And your question is if you went 10 more,
more.
20 more, how much would you lose?
8,000 square feet.
At 10 feet, not per foot.
Right.
Right, okay, yeah, I can live by that, I ask per foot, whatever. But, okay.
Not as smart, you have to ask Mr.
I'm letting
Brown.
her, she does it, yeah.
Yeah, but it's substantial as you go with that, and that's all in their calculations and storage and rents and. Like you're losing an acre of your ground.
Seriously, what's the dimensions on the building again?
Kevin?
It is 130 by 300.
And we had a couple, we've been with staff for months and even months before we went to staff, and we had 2 buildings in there. We were trying to not disturb any more of a footprint than we could. We had one plan that had 3 buildings in there. In fact, one was on the side, it would be on the northeast side of Mr. Hudson's property. We were just trying to keep everything off of that, and we wound up with just one building, rather than 2 or 3 separate buildings. That was more disturbance in that area. So that's why that one building got so big. I think our square footage was always going to be about the same, but it was in a couple, 2 or 3 different buildings. So there's already structures there. It was the less disturbance, the less tree clearing we had, and we just that's what we kind of wound up with.
So a requirement for growth allocation is to minimize impacts to habitat protection areas. Those tidal wetlands,
Zoom in. There you go.
there we go, which is the darker green on there, are considered habitat protection areas, so it would not be favorable for a growth allocation petition, therefore, if they're impacting those habitat protection areas. So that kind of gives you an idea as to why they can't move the building to the south. Otherwise, it might not be favorable for growth allocation.
But just to be clear, Mr. Stevens, you stated earlier that there were no non-tidal wetland disturbances, and you're, in fact, planning to fill some of those non-tidal.
No, the only disturbance we'll have is to the non-tidal wetland buffer, and MDE's already issued that permit to us. So we won't have any.
I'm sorry, I said temporary.
This legend is misleading.
Kevin, is that cul-de-sac's going to be within those non-tidal wetlands, correct?
It's going to be within the non-tidal wetland buffer.
The buffer, excuse
buffer.
me, excuse me.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I thought it was only a temporary impact.
Well, then clarify, please, for me why I'm looking at this stippled and hatched area that states on the legend depicts areas of non-tidal wetland buffer to be disturbed.
The buffer is to be disturbed, the
So that's-
25-foot buffer.
Okay, just not the wetland itself, the 25-foot buffer. And that's to be filled, or what's the meaning of disturbance in that specific area?
Well, it'll most likely be tie-off grades from the cul-de-sac or the outfall from the stormwater, things like that. It's not necessarily going to be filled just because it needs to be filled, but we're giving ourselves a little bit of room for constructability.
But you're also removing habitat to construct the stormwater utility features.
Yes, because we have to meet that code.
Understood. But
Which
it seems a little counterintuitive to me that we're doing that, but I understand why it needs to be done and why it needs to go there.
Also, the non-tidal wetlands buffer is not considered a habitat protection area, only the non-tidal wetlands.
Correct.
Just to clarify that for you.
But I still, while I have the floor, right, we're doing, these are the types of things I think that really get under the skin of a lot of the citizens of the county, right, where I can't put a doghouse in critical area. I can't clear trees from my waterfront property without all these things. Yet the applicant wants to go from LDA and RCA, which are very protective, to IDA, intensely developed area. You're doing lot line adjustments to put this building in its place on its foundation. You're removing trees and habitat. You're creating wetland disturbances, floodplain fills. What else? Critical area growth allocation for arguably something that's doesn't to me meet the level of intensity that something like the last growth allocation that I think I was involved in was for the Queenstown emergency room. That's an infrastructure improvement, I think, that rises to the level of growth allocation, not simply a 4-story box to store things that I don't want in my house in. You understand? No disrespect for your ideas and your projects, but this is what infuriates a lot of people in this county that they can't do, yet you're coming to us and protecting things you're doing, and you're proffering, amendments. Appreciate it greatly, but it's still this monolithic thing that you're going to see from Route 50, and the development right next door in Gibson's Grant, I can't even see the top of a chimney that they've gone into such great measures to hide and screen that development. Just from an optics perspective, the people in this county, I think, are going to be frustrated with, holy cow, how did that thing get plugged into that little hole with all those sensitive areas? And they did their best, and they've worked hard with staff and others to reduce that footprint, but they don't understand that on its surface when they see this thing go up. And I agree wholeheartedly with the neighbors, and that this will be the largest thing on the island, practically. Building footprint, scale-wise, it just seems like the quintessential example of a square peg in a round hole with a massive hammer beating it in, because of all of these things that we've mentioned and talked about.
Well, I'd like to address a little bit of that. I think that the first thing that you got to keep in mind is that this is in the growth area. And this is the area that's zoned town center, the most intense zoning that the county has. And all the property there, the neighbors' properties, everybody has that same, zoning and flexibility to develop that property in accordance with the zoning. That's the first thing. The second thing is that people in the critical areas, it's a misconception to say that they can't cut a tree down, or they can't put a doghouse up, because they can. The critical areas is not a prohibition on development. It's simply an additional overlay of regulations. And in many places in the critical area, you can do significant development. Thirdly, we are not asking for any resource conservation area to be redesignated to IDA. This is LDA, limited development area that allows this use. The only thing it does have is a 15% lot coverage limitation. And in order for us to just get a reasonable amount of lot coverage on a property that has the most intense zoning in the county, we would need that upgrade for that 2.8 acres. So, you know, we don't see this as inconsistent with those provisions, and I think that some of the optics are unfortunate, because these are the areas that you want to use growth allocation. You don't want to go jump down into a rural area and use growth allocation down there. You want to use it where you have sewer and water, and that's what all the policies shift this towards. Now, there are some sensitive resources on this site. We all admit that, and we're staying out of them to a very large extent. So we think it is a site that should have some favorable look, because really, if it doesn't get growth allocation, it can't really develop in accordance with its underlying zoning because of that 15% limitation. So, you know, that's our view, and I do think sometimes optics are unfortunate, but I don't know if that plays.
Yeah, but your growth allocation doesn't mean it has to be a 4-story, you know, storage facility.
That is, you know, that's fair for you all to assess, and the concerns of the neighbors. I'm not trying to belittle that or get around that.
It can be part of growth allocation, just doesn't have to be this type of a facility.
Well, it doesn't have to be. If there's concern about the scale and so on and so forth, and the adjacency with the neighbors, I think those are legitimate. I think Mr. Schultz is willing to step back over this next month or so before we get back with you and sit down with the neighbors again and see if we can address those.
As part of that revisit of the topic, you did a nice job, I think, of presenting this board with the sort of the picture of what might look like your hotel from the bridge, from this side, from that angle. Would that, I'd like to please ask that be presided next time you come around, so that we can get an understanding of the proximity to the neighbors and what this is going to look like out their porch window, and what it would look like also from Route 50 when passengers look at the gas station that's there, Mr. Marsh's marine business, and then this 45-foot building behind it, please. Just so that we can get an understanding of what that scale, because that's been brought up significantly, I think, in today's conversation.
Yeah.
Consider that a technical comment as well.
If boards think so, I'm offering up abilities for the applicant to alleviate some of those concerns of the visual aesthetics of what this might look like, right? The renderings that you guys have presented in the past. Right. This is what this is going to look like. Here's what the color scheme is going to like stand out, or is it going to blend in with the woods? Because right now it's awfully red. Can things be done to massage that and alleviate some of those concerns that, holy cow, that's a big building. Why is it stuffed in the corner of the woods next to this family's house? That's obviously incongruent and inconsistent with what's currently done in that corner of the property, or corner of the county.
Well, we know it's a big building. You know, it's not that we're trying to say we're not doing a large, very large project there, but, you know, we had the option, I had the option of many different projects in there to range from residential. My door was getting beat down for apartments, and I thought, you know, I don't feel like that's the best thing there, and office buildings and all these things, and I just felt like this was a use, minimal sewer, minimal water, and it was going to be the best. I felt like there was a need, in talking with Jason, that is needed here. This indoor self-storage, it's not the unsightly outdoors that most of the people have here. It's an indoor self-storage facility, and it would look no different than any other large building. We keep it clean. You wouldn't have the junk sitting outside that a lot of these have, and that's kind of where we landed. And the, you know, the economics of it just got to that size building, and trying to make it one. Like I said, we were trying not to disturb any more land than we had to with cutting down. I get all your points loud and clear about disturbing, but at the end of the day, the stormwater that we're providing there, what's going to be there, is going to be better than I think what's there now, with the two structures that are there now. The dilapidated road, which is a private road that we have made, we say we're going to allow continued access from the neighbors on this improved road, improve the stormwater management that goes down the road and all that. So we've been, that's just sketching this thing for a couple of years and felt like this was the best. Now, is it a big ass building? Yep. I'll be the first to admit it. Now, we'll try to, make it look as best we can. You're probably, hopefully not even going to see it coming this way. Right. Because of the woods and how we put it back in there. You're going to see it coming this way, no question, but I think we'll just keep massaging it and trying to make it, where we're not going to make everybody happy. We're not going to sit here and think everybody's going to be happy. We'll try to, make the neighbors happy as best we can and clean up the area. And, we're going to provide public water to an area that's not served now. I don't know if it was mentioned, we're donating with about 1.5 acres of land, waterfront on the other part, the north parcel to the county. And, let's not forget that the state of Maryland has, a 300-foot overpass that's scheduled to go in there. And you won't see one of them. They're going to come in here and rip down through the woods and tear out what they want and could care less what anybody thinks.
It might be helpful if Jason, could you go over, give an overview of the use, how you operate it? Because while the building's big, this is not an intense use from an hourly operation, and people.
Well, that was my
come in
next
and all
question.
that.
Is it in the technical requests? I'd like to see some sort of trips generated data. How often this.
Minimum use, you might see 15. Who are you? You might see 15, 20 customers a
Now,
day.
you need to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Jason Clow, and I'm with Clow Ventures. We're working with Mr. Schultz on putting the building up. We're going to operate it. We also operate one down in Easton. It's going to be a similar size to this one. And
Gonna be?
it is. It's there now.
Okay.
Where's that specifically?
It's right behind the airport. Well, right next to the airport where the MBA is.
Okay.
You know where the MBA, that
On that
little
back
side
road?
road that runs
Yep.
there? Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
And we also operate one in by Chesapeake College also. And they're very minimal impact to the community.
How big is the one by Chesapeake College?
It's not very big. That one's only 20,000 square feet.
Height-wise?
It's a single story, yeah.
And the one in Easton is?
One in Easton is a 3-story. It's multiple buildings there, though. It's a 3-story building and then two single-story buildings. But the nice thing about the storage buildings they're very minimal impact to the community because there's not many cars that go there every day. It's not like people are using all the toilets and showers and washing clothes. Our facility in Easton has one toilet that the staff uses, and that's really about it.
This building is to be open 24 hours a day to renters of the city?
Our facility in Easton is, but we think we're going to restrict this one to have a time, probably close at like 9 o'clock at night. Just to keep people from being there when there's not a manager on.
Sure, well, I'm listening to the concerns of the testimony you've heard today that security is a big problem. And I certainly don't see, appropriate disturbances at midnight because somebody has to be out by 11:59 out of their apartment and they've got to put their storage in the facility that they're running up against that wall. So
These facilities are usually we have a fence where you have to have a key code to get into the facility first of all. So they have to put a key code in just to get into the property. And then they have another keypad at the door that lets them into the building itself. And we are going to probably limit them at night because I've heard of problems. We've never had a problem, but I've heard of people trying to live in their storage buildings and stuff goes on at night that he's probably concerned about. That's why we're probably going to close it at like 10 o'clock at night, 9 to 10 o'clock at night, see how it goes.
All right, can we, in further iterations of this conversation, could we work on that word probably?
Sure. Oh, yeah, we can think it, we can look at it and see when
Technical comment. You could make that a technical comment.
Please, that there be some discernible window of access by appropriate renters, I don't know what you call these facilities, right? They rent a box, a space within this box, that those be at least submitted. Don't want to influence what they are at this point, but hours of operation for the public.
On that note, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Please. Meeting's back in order. Do we have more comment from the board? More questions?
I just want to confirm, I have read in the paperwork that we were provided that no agencies that have reviewed the concept plan have offered objection to its approval. So I wanted to confirm that. I also want to confirm that the process, this is just a launching process, and that the next steps, there are at least how many public hearings involved? 2, 3? 2 to 3, and that they need to go and address, other more specific issues. So I just want to confirm that, and the growth allocation process has its own separate process from this.
This is part of that. This is part of it, but yes.
They're going to go into detail. Okay, I just want to confirm all that.
Can I take that confirmation step one step closer and ask Mr. Porter, county engineer from DPW? He and I were involved in the STAC meeting months ago. Mr. Porter, not to put you on the spot, but I'd like to put you on the spot. You obviously have been working with the applicant on this for months. And does your professional assessment of the progress that they've made and the footprint and the impact that they're having at this location?
Well, wait a minute. Can you introduce yourself and tell what it is that you do?
My name is Trey Porter. I'm with DPW. I do stormwater management and water quality assessments for development review.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Porter, thank you. The proposal that's before us has gone through many iterations and evolution as it typically do, as projects typically do to come to this point. In your assessment, has the steps that have been taken by the applicant reduced those initial concerns that were expressed in staff reports about impacts to receiving waters, impacts to sensitive areas, and that this is an appropriate use of that particular property? In your professional opinion, of course.
So the impacts have been reduced. The scale of the project has gone down substantially. There were encroachments into the wetland. Now there aren't any. There are encroachments into the wetland buffer. So there have been substantial reductions. In the consideration of today, we're talking about the concept plan and not growth allocation. So my department doesn't have objection for concept level approval. We have comments on the growth allocation, but we're not making any recommendation favorable or unfavorable for the growth allocation. What I will be doing is pointing out to this committee, to the Planning Commission, and also to the commissioners, any encroachments, and then ultimately the decision is yours to make. At this point, I do recognize that the evolution of this project has trimmed substantially, and while there still are some concerns and something that we can work through in the future, at this point, I think they have addressed the comments that we've made from a concept level plan. And I do think that, when it comes to growth allocation, we always weigh, the public benefit versus, you weigh, we consider it, and then, you weigh the public, what's offered as far as amenities and things like that, and how, and certainly in the environmental portion of it is my portion, and also planning, and we weigh that as well, and we consider that. But at this point, yeah, I think many of the initial concerns that we had from the first STAC meeting, was that last fall, they've addressed a lot of what we've asked for, and I think at the last meeting that we had, one of the considerations that we were looking into was the donation of that waterfront property, which is sort of creates a path to a larger county tract of land that could be used for passive, what do they call that? Passive recreation, yeah. So that type of thing. It creates an opportunity for community and public engagement with the environment, and that's something that we look at. But, so to answer your question, there's stormwater that's, at this level at Concept, we don't really look at calculations as much. There are some calculations preliminary, but really what we look at is, has the developer provided an adequate area, a footprint for stormwater management? And they have. Now, that is, it's in an existing wooded area. It's in the floodplain, and I've talked to the engineer involved in that and made sure that, so submerged gravel wetlands need to be actually kind of elevated, so they're not in, we've talked about this in the past, so that they're not in the floodplain, or not the floodplain, but not in the backwater, tailwater condition where they're introducing salt water into them. So I've talked to Kevin Sheeran at DMS and kind of put them on notice that that's something we're going to be looking at, is basically the hydraulics and making sure that there's no saltwater inundation into these things. And that's pretty typical on any type of development that's up against the floodplain. So there has been consideration throughout this process. We've talked about there's a cul-de-sac on this, and that's been reduced in size. So it's a process, and we're working through it. 100%, have they completely avoided all the environmental concerns? No, but that's typical of development.
Especially at this stage.
At this stage, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity in the future to look at this closer, but they've done a good job of reacting to the concerns and comments that my department has had.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments or?
I'd like to add a request on the technical side, obviously with the approval of the rest of the board, is to, because there have been comments and I'll leave it at comments, about the scale and the massing of the appearance and the visual, if there is any architectural tricks to change the color or pitch of the roof or something that would alleviate some of those concerns, right? Because the facade is going to be visible traveling eastbound, especially if it's red and boxed looking to me without seeing it. That can be in the technical aspects that looked at by the team. How can we either physically reduce the size of that scale, or how can we make the appearance that it is not as monolithic as it's sometimes seen on these representations?
What I was going to say is that if the board's inclined, if they want it, there's probably more than, I know there's more technical comments than that. So if you want to give them to us, we'll take them in accordance with the regulations, and we'll come back to you with how we've addressed them or our responses to all of those, and we'll do that at the next stage as in accordance with the provisions, including that one.
We talked about the red, and that was a color that Mr. Clow and that group had wanted, and some of the earlier comments was about the red. So I did a red ride one day, and it's amazing the red that you see on Route 50. The Autobell Car Wash, Red Apple Plaza, the red canopies, Patriot Fire is a huge red roof. Colonel Sanders, he's all red down there. So Target's big red. So we're going to work on the red. Denny's is red. I mean, it's unbelievable, the red that stands out, I guess, for a reason to grab attention. But I think we'll work with the architect and just
it's more of a
soften
maroon.
that up a little bit.
It's more of a maroon color that's been the rendering shows too.
We'll bring.
I get it.
We'll bring some facade
I don't know that you
samples.
need a billboard red to say, here's a storage facility, right? I get it that you need it for a facade for a fried chicken bucket, but.
Looks more like a barn.
Right. I think we can, I'm suggesting that this group can do better, that's all.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you hearing my concerns and comments.
But his red was, I think it was more of a bird. I don't think it was at the start, but I think it'll be easy to soften that up.
And there are town center requirements for the building. There's certain things we had to do on the building to meet the town center.
Sure. Well, but I mean, in the past, we see swatches of things, right? When you come in with textures and different shapes.
We'll bring that next time. Bring that next time.
Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't convey on the printer.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to clarify, so you're looking for the building to be more camouflaged with the natural environment? Is that what you're
That's
thinking?
perfectly worded, thank you.
Okay, yes.
Okay, any more comments? Can I get a motion?
Madam Chair, I will offer a motion to resolve that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Cloud Ventures LLC for concept plan approval for a 156,000 square foot, 4-story indoor self-storage facility, and is more particularly described in Department of Planning and Zoning File SP number 21-10-0082, hereby finds that the concept plan is consistent with the goals and objectives of the Queen Anne's County zoning and subdivision regulations and the 2022 comprehensive plan, and hereby grants concept plan approval subject to the following conditions. 1, any remaining edits and/or documents required by a reviewing agency, the Department of Public Works or Planning and Zoning, be reviewed and approved. 2, the architecture and overall site design must substantially reflect the documents provided. 3, the administrative subdivision must be approved and recorded prior to final site plan signature. 4, growth allocation, redesignating 2.811 acres of LDA, limited development area, to IDA, intensely developed area, must be granted to proceed with final site plan review. All conditions must be addressed at the time of final site plan approval. Number 5, that the applicants meet with the Hudson family, the adjacent property owners, to address their privacy and security concerns. Number 6, that the applicants formulate a plan of hours of operation and security plan. 7, the applicants provide a rendering of the structure amongst the surrounding properties. And number 8, an attempt be made to mitigate the appearance of the structure to reduce its visual impact and fit more into the surrounding areas.
So there was one more. It was the trips generated data. I think that was also, was that one? Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Yep.
It's proposed trips,
Yeah, it's easy.
right?
That the applicants provide an anticipated trip.
Yeah, we'll have to provide a traffic analysis or a
Traffic
letter
analysis.
that none's necessary later on, but we'll give you our anticipated traffic flow.
Okay.
Next time.
How many cars a day?
Yep.
What was 8? I'm sorry. What was 8?
Mitigate the appearance.
Of the structure to reduce its visual impact.
Yeah, you will
What
get these to you.
Mr. Lee had
Camo.
addressed a few minutes ago. Camouflage, yeah, wrap it in camo.
That should be easy.
That was my original idea, but I thought that.
Okay, so that is my motion with the technical
Is there a
requests.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
2 opposed. So it's 2 out of 6. Mr. Reese had to excuse himself for a meeting.
Wait, can I see the eyes? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, any other public comments? You have nothing? Okay, I would like to have a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.